Hi, and welcome to this video. Today, I want to show you a complete picture of what's driving insulin resistance and the simple shifts that can turn it around. If you have a blood glucose problem, chances are you had an insulin problem first, even if no one told you. When most people are diagnosed with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, what's the first thing that they hear? Eat less sugar and drink Coke Zero instead. The focus tends to be almost entirely on sugar, and yes, for good reason. But insulin, if you've heard it at all, it usually is in the context of something like you might need more of it down the road. But here's what we could be asking instead. If high blood sugar is the problem and insulin is a hormone that lowers it, why do people on insulin seem to be requiring more of it? And is more insulin the solution? If we can grasp that what looks like a glucose problem is rooted in high insulin demands here and constant insulin stimulation over time, even long before labs show high blood glucose, then these next few minutes can open up so many paths to lowering insulin needs and reversing type 2 diabetes. And who doesn't want that? So let's explore what it takes to help your body respond better to insulin so we can finally do what it was designed to do. I want to start with an eye opening study. Actually, I pulled this one out of a book by Dr. Ben Bigman. So, 15 healthy men were given an IV insulin infusion for 4 days. After those 4 days, they became insulin resistant. So, unless you're in the ICU, that's not likely to happen to you directly. But zoom out and you'll notice something eerily familiar. In modern life, many of us are unintentionally mimicking this pattern. We sit for 8 to 12 hours a day and we eat across that same 8 to 12-hour window, often grazing between meals, having a meal, then also snacking after work, during commutes, and while shuttling our kids to their activities. So let's look at what we already know raises blood glucose and therefore calls insulin to work. White bread, bagels, buns. Sugary breakfast cereals. Pasta, white rice, pastries, donuts, cakes, muffins, ice cream, milkshakes, candy, chocolate bars, soda, sweetened drinks, french fries, potato chips, pizza. Foods that have a high glycemic load, are low in fiber and fat, tend to be starchy, trigger a sweet taste, even artificially, contain added sugars, and include insulin stimulating proteins. These are foods that we call insulinogenic, if I said it properly. Insulinogenic foods, foods that stimulate insulin production, insulin growth. That's why I don't just look at sugar, the sugar content on packages, on a label. I read the ingredients. So let's run through a list of common offenders that increase insulin load more than you think. Oatmeal. So the instant ones, the flavored ones that are marketed as heart healthy, even if they're organic, they're likely sometimes if it's not labeled organic, they will likely be containing herbicides like glyphosate, which actually promote insulin resistance. Then you have whole wheat bread, brown bread, multigrain bread, all those kinds. Breakfast cereal. Doesn't have to be sugary. Breakfast cereal. Diet sodas, because they contain artificial sugars like sucralose and aspartame, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that affects blood sugar. Low fat flavored yogurt, cow's milk, and in this bracket, we include skim milk, chocolate milk, high protein milk, lactose free milk, protein bars, instant mashed potatoes, brown rice, bananas, grapes, granola bars, gluten free crackers, fruit smoothies, rice cakes, and instant broths, like especially those that have MSG. And are these not often seen in diabetes meals plans? What surprised you the most in this list? Whole wheat brown multi-grain bread? Sounds healthy, right? But these actually break down into sugar faster than table sugar. It's because of a protein called amylopectin A that break down the starches quicker, and so your body absorbs it faster, creating a spike. What about sourdough bread? A lot of people ask. Yeah, the long fermented traditional sourdough bread, not just those fake versions I call that have vinegar added to it to make it sour tasting. They lead to a slower rise in blood sugar, calling on insulin, a steady flow of insulin. So it's often a better option. Diet soda. So, even without the calories or sugar or the glucose, artificial sweeteners can still trigger an insulin response in the brain. So, insulin gets released expecting glucose, but none is there, right? Now, your body is starting to search for sugar sources to match that what insulin is looking for. And then finally, high protein milk. I thought you're getting protein. So even so, Natural's 18-gram protein milk version can spike insulin because it is also considered lactose free. I believe so. If I'm wrong, I'll please correct me. But the lactose is actually broken down, right, by the enzyme lactase, which they put in there. So this sugar, this lactose, which is a sugar, is actually broken down more simply into the glucose and the galactose. So the sugar is already digested for you and ready and more available. And then you have milk proteins like casein and whey, which are insulinogenic too. So this causes a release more than the initial release, so more than double. Now picture this: you're pouring that milk into multigrain Cheerios because it's multigrain. But these cereals also have refined wheat. They have added sugars, no matter the amount, and then insulin triggering milk proteins. That's a full blown insulin explosion. Plus, you have those additives and the pesticides lingering in there. These spike insulin and fill up the storage room in the cells, primarily the muscle cells, with glucose. So, what ends up happening when there's no more room? The pancreas pushes out more insulin, leading to more higher levels of insulin, trying to force more glucose into those cells. But what happens when cells actually can't receive that signal? So we're going to go to that next. So we have two scenarios. So here's where the picture gets more complete. A constant trigger most of us live with every day can damage receiving centers of insulin on cells, and that's stress. Your body doesn't just respond to physical danger, it treats any stress, real or perceived, as a threat. And yes, that includes a steady stream of insulinogenic foods. They contain the sugar, the seed oils, the refined grains, the artificial ingredients. They are a stressor to your body. In response, your adrenal glands, those small glands that sit on top of the kidneys, release cortisol, your stress hormone, just like your pancreas releases insulin when it senses glucose in your blood. So, cortisol's job is to fuel your body's fight or flight response with glucose, with energy. It signals for more blood sugar so your brain can think fast and your muscles and your heart can act quickly. Then insulin steps in, like it always does, to bring your blood sugar levels back down, blood glucose levels back down, and restore balance. But here's the twist: when cortisol stays high, when stress stays high, it blunts insulin's effectiveness. So your body starts pumping out even more insulin to compensate, even if your blood sugar or your blood glucose levels look normal. So over time, cortisol wins, keeps winning the battle, leaving your stress systems worn out, your nervous system overstimulated, and your body running on empty, physically, mentally, emotionally. So this is a time where we can pause and ask, what are my daily stressors? We've got some internal stressors that cause inflammation within. So things that we actually put in and come into our body. So we talked about the insulinogenic foods, which we can actually define as ultra processed foods. They contain like a high fructose corn syrup, more sugars, different types of sugars, refined grains. They contain those additives, the stabilizers, seed oils, which are inflammatory, MSG, which creates insulin resistance, and the dairy proteins, right? Ultra processed foods. And then next we have chronic infections. Excess sugar actually depresses your immune system. So it's a vicious cycle there. And one can of soda, which has about 35 grams of sugar, can suppress your immune system for up to 5 hours after drinking. But it just reduces the activity of white blood cells, your fighting cells. And then dehydration as well is an internal inflammatory stressor. And so to learn more, you can see my video on hydration. Food sensitivities like gluten, dairy, corn, those are the more common ones. They will weaken and or break down the gut barrier, so the small and large intestinal tract, which creates low grade inflammation. We've got chemical exposures that we inhale or drink from, like the plastics that contain BPA. A lot of them have removed it, but there's still other plastics out there with other things that we might not know about or are learning more about that create insulin resistance and inflammation in our bodies. Those microwavable containers, lunch containers, we put in to heat up our lunch. Ingredients in conventional makeup and nail polish, lotions, shampoos, conditioners, Vaseline. Um, then we have also poor air quality from the fumes that we take in. Then we also have pesticides or herbicides. So I mentioned before glyphosate on oats. Did I mention it? I don't know if I did. But glyphosate on oats, atrazine on corn, all these pesticides to keep the crop growing, right? Spills into our drainage system and it can leak into our tap water, it can leak into seaweed. So these are things to just be mindful of in terms of chemical exposures. And then there's mold. If you have mold growing on in the walls of your house, they actually release mycotoxins, which create insulin resistance. Smoking, whether it's first, second, or third hand, the nicotine actually increases insulin resistance. When I talk about, so first hand is the person who's actually smoking, the second hand is all the smoke that someone else inhales. And then third hand smoking is all the residue that is left on furniture, carpets, and the things that we step on, babies crawl on. That's third hand smoke. And then we have alcohol, specifically beer, as beer contains maltose, which is also a type of sugar. So these, other than the ultra processed foods, they don't fill up our cells with glucose, but the rest work on the other end to quietly inflame and impair the insulin receiving centers of almost every cell in your body. That's the other part of the equation of insulin resistance. Then we've got other external stressors, like I like to say lifestyle triggers. Those are like working at a desk job, 8 hours a day, or shift work, emotionally draining or abusive relationships, suppressed emotions, and we focus a lot on anger, repressed anger here. There are a lot of studies on it that also link it to cancer. Financial stress, sedentary lifestyle, um, they actually, when we're not moving, our bodies actually release an inflammatory marker. It's stressful for the body not to move. And then at also we're if we're not activating our muscles, we're also losing the largest storage room for glucose. And then poor sleep. So just 1 hour, one night of 4 to 5 hours can reduce insulin sensitivity by up to 30% the next day. Air pollution, again, I mentioned here because of the environment. Some of the locations that we live on are very close to industrialized areas. So, what now? The goal isn't to overhaul your whole life, no more extreme makeovers. It's to lower the daily demand on your insulin by making one consistent shift. Because doing one thing regularly is far more powerful than doing everything perfectly for a day or two. And then doing nothing, well, that's a habit too, but one that keeps insulin resistance locked in. So try choosing one habit that you can actually stick with. So here are some examples. You can swap a whole wheat toast for a baked sweet potato. Trade juice or pop for sparkling water. You can replace low fat products with real full fat versions of food like avocado. Um, you can break up long sitting periods at work. So try to break it up every 30 minutes with 2 minutes of light movement, whether it's those push ups on the desk or even just a very powerful squat, 10 powerful squats. You can say no to something or someone that actually drains you and overwhelms you. Or you can also set an evening alarm to help you wind down and get ready for sleep. It's rest that our body actually needs, the physical need. If you're feeling bold, you can ask if the food that you're ordering actually contains some MSG. Your body deserves to know. So much of my background is in nursing. So even as a nutrition coach, I'm wired to watch for early signs because prevention is powerful when paired with habits that truly support health. And for me, the more natural and aligned they are with my body, it's better. And I get it, taking action when nothing feels wrong or it's nothing that you can't handle right now, it can be tough. But for those of us who want to become more proactive and are health conscious, here here are early signs of insulin overload that you can watch out for you and for your loved ones. These are clues. These clues can show up long before you get a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes or even pre-diabetes. Here are your clues. So blood pressure over 125 over 85. And you can get this done at a Shoppers Drug Mart if you're in Canada or anywhere, any other drug mart. They have blood pressure um, cuffs around. Anything over 125 over 85. It's not just the salt. A lot of physicians do that. Healthcare practitioners, even at the very beginning of my practice too, I would say it's salt. It's often insulin behind the scenes. High insulin signals your kidneys to retain sodium. So water follows because our body is all about balance. And so blood pressure rises. Then we've got a resting heart rate over 80 beats per minute, are clues for insulin resistance and high insulin levels. Because high insulin keeps your body in stress mode and it activates that fight or flee system. So you can also, if you're using your blood pressure cuff, it also measures your heart rate. Or you could just, if you have a smartwatch, you can just look for the info there. Or you can take your pulse just below the thumb here. Just lightly press um, on that wrist, inner aspect of the wrist, and just count how many beats you get or how many pulses you feel in a minute. Ideally, you want 60 to 70 beats per minute at rest. Increased waist circumference, so over 35 inches for women and 39 inches for a man. So this is not about comparing anyone to Ken and Barbie. It's about visceral fat, fat stored deep around your organs, and it's driven by insulin. So let it be a signal, not a sentence. Then you've got skin tags and dark patches around the neck or even the underarm. If you're experiencing morning brain fog or afternoon crashes, especially after you've had a meal already, frequent carb or sugar cravings, frequent urination or thirst, and this kind of goes along with diabetes as well. Bloating on more to the right side of your rib if you're experiencing that often. If you're a woman, irregular menstrual cycle. And after meals, experiencing a flush or like hot skin after meals because we've got your blood vessels here, right? Um, they begin to widen to help shuttle in all of the extra glucose that's coming in, especially after a heavy processed meal, right? So it's opening it up and helping your body move all of that glucose through the bloodstream. That's the blood vessels widening and us getting a little bit flush. Waking between the hours of 2 to 4 a.m. So, a blood sugar crash or a blood glucose crash after an evening insulin spike can trigger cortisol. And so, yes, high insulin is a stressor itself. Your brain senses danger, and so you wake up. So, what you can try doing is focusing more on protein and the fat and the fiber at dinner time to steady this. So these clues aren't random clues, are not because we're aging. They're actually red flags, and our body is asking us to treat it that way. So if this has helped you connect the dots of what high insulin has to do with blood glucose imbalances, please like and share with someone who needs to hear it. There are more videos coming with real practical ways to reset insulin and bring those blood glucose levels back down to normal functional range. So your body is doing its best with what it's been given. And but remember this, that when you change the inputs, you can change the outcome. See you next time.